Good afternoon. My name is Aaron Taylor, and I serve as Executive Director of the AccessLex Center for Legal Education Excellence, and I'll be the moderator for this discussion titled Best Practices for Using Your Building Bar Skills Modules in Preparing for NextGen. So we're joined today on the panel by Tony Michelli and Garrett Hallidier, and I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves more fully for you. Tony?
Hello, everyone. I am Tony Michelli. I am the Director of Academic and Bar Exam Success here at St. Louis University School of Law. I have been on faculty here for 13 years. I started in the bar prep arena and grew into the academic support as well to get further in front of the skills that students need in order to be successful on the bar exam. And I think that is especially important as we're looking towards NextGen, because as we know from learning theory, the more opportunities that we give these students to engage in these skills that they'll be tested on and that directly relate to practice, the better. And so I was really excited to get involved in this project, particularly in the area of civil procedure, something that I think my first year of law school, I was looking for any excuse to get out of, because I know that that was an area that I see today as a faculty member, students struggle to connect with and find context in their learning. And so that was a really exciting piece of this project for me, was to figure out how to get in front of a 1L, an early first semester 1L, and start creating that pathway towards bar exam success and practice as well. Garrett, you want to introduce yourself?
Thanks, Tony. My name is Garrett Hallidier. I am the Director of Bar Success at the University of Hawaii, where I also teach some business law classes. I started here specifically for bar success in 2020, but I bring from before that about 15 years of kind of test prep experience. And so I was brought in to help on the test prep side in particular for some parts of bar success. And I'm excited to have been able to integrate some of that kind of experience and approach into some of our bar skills modules. I got to help out in particular with the torts module for intentional torts and negligence. And we'll talk more about that as we go through today. Thanks.
All right, so it's clear that we have a great duo for today's brief discussion, and there will be a question and answer period at the end of their talk. So we invite you to submit any questions that you have as you listen to them, as you consider different things, different issues that come to mind, and you can use the Q&A box on your screen, and we'll get to as many of your questions as we can before time runs out. So with that, Garrett, back to you.
Thank you very much, Aaron. So starting with this first slide, we're kind of going to give an overview of what bar skills modules are, why they are, and kind of what this project was about. So these modules are complete assignments for professors to use to integrate in their classes to give 1Ls exposure and practice with bar-tested materials and skills kind of early in their law school career, especially as we transition to the more skills-oriented NextGen Bar Exam. These modules are very AccessLex, and this is where I get to do the sales pitch for them for a second. They were designed collaboratively with input from academic success, bar success, substantive law professors, and educational material professionals through AccessLex. They were field tested. All of these modules were run in an actual 1L class or substantive class. Some of them were 2L as well. And they're fairly realistic to what the NextGen or how the NextGen bar is going to be testing these skills. The topics kind of generally align with your 1L subjects as well as those that are tested on the bar, those being Civ Pro, contracts, torts, criminal law, and professional responsibility are the ones we currently have modules for, and we've got more modules on the way over the next year or so. The project, or this particular project, drew from the expertise and partner teams at the University of Hawaii, St. Louis University, Syracuse University, Ohio Northern University, Nova Southeastern University, and the University of Denver. And it was an honor and a lot of fun to work with all of them kind of throughout the year as we iterated these modules over time based on our feedback in the classroom and based on the feedback from each other to kind of continue to improve them. Now, the point of the modules is a response to the way the NextGen is going to be adapting some of its approach to questioning. So the NextGen we know is going to be testing your kind of traditional bar legal writing, research, issue spotting, analysis skills, but it's going to add in investigation and evaluation, client counseling and advising, negotiation and dispute resolution, and client relationship and management skills as well. These are not necessarily things that are currently in our really doctrinal level 1L courses. So kind of the point of these modules is really early on in a law student's career to give professors the opportunity to begin to integrate some of those skills earlier in their curriculum without forcing them to necessarily like redo their whole class around the bar, but to give them just kind of plug and play modules that allows these skills to be introduced to students earlier. The bar is going to be testing these things through both traditional multiple choice questions and traditional performance tests. Those are your like closed universe. Here's some facts, here's some law, here's a couple of cases, write an opinion memo or a brief. And then it's introducing these integrated question sets. These will kind of walk students through a client interaction or a dispute or a case management issue kind of over time, and it'll provide new information between different sorts of questions as the situation develops. So the students will be responding to these kind of dynamic situations that are reflected in multiple choice questions, short answer questions, maybe an all that apply question, some short IRAC like mini essays, and then some longer kind of medium length essays. And they're all integrated together into a single kind of additive fact pattern. And so that's in particular what a lot of our modules are based around, is to give both students and now professors an introduction to what that sort of question set looks like. So each of these bar skills modules is designed to be adopted either in pieces or as a whole, so that faculty can dip their toes into that next-gen formative assessment or integrate it throughout the course of the semester. Each of the modules has several kind of sub-modules, usually all of which can stand alone, so the professor can pick and choose what works for them. And we'll go into a lot more details of those modules here momentarily. These modules were also designed with ABA student learning objectives in mind. Tony?
Yeah, so as we were designing these modules, we were really thoughtful of the purpose, which was twofold, right? One was to introduce students to next-gen skills, and the other was to provide formative assessment opportunities that are easy to adopt for faculty in that 1L year particularly. And so in keeping those forefront in our mind, we were very intentional that our formative assessment tools are short, low stakes checks that provide both the professor and the student with that feedback mechanism on how the student learning is going. And so in doing so, we were really mindful of ABA standards 314 and 315, and we wanted to provide tools that would help you in complying with those standards. So just a quick recap, standard 314 requires law schools to utilize both formative and summative assessment in their curriculum and to measure and improve student learning, as well as provide meaningful feedback to those students. And so as we designed the back end, so to speak, of each of these modules, we were very thoughtful in creating materials that could be used by the professor in assessing and providing that feedback, or by the students themselves. And standard 315 is the one that really requires that ongoing evaluation of whether or not you're meeting your learning outcomes. And so we were thoughtful about providing in the actual faculty materials, student learning outcomes for each of these modules that are directly tied to the next gen skills that are going to be tested. And so each of these skill modules include student learning outcomes, faculty rubrics, sample answers, as well as self-assessment exercises for the students to utilize. And these are not short self-assessment exercises. These are very in-depth exercises. And that's what we're going to focus on for the latter half of our presentation today. This really allows faculty then to adopt one of two pathways. They can adopt the faculty grading rubrics and the sample answers so that they're able to measure and improve the student learning, as well as provide feedback through the rubric and sample answers to the students. Or they can shift that to the student by adopting the student self-assessment. And so the student self-assessment exercises paired with the sample answers really step-by-step walk the student through various learning exercises to understand both structurally and substantively where their answer was strong and where they can improve. And so what we're going to do next is really focus in and dive in first into the civil procedure modules that I worked on with my colleague, Professor Ann Scarlett, to help you see just how these student self-assessment exercises work. So when we designed our student self-assessment exercises, there are three parts. One is initially a highlighter exercise. And for those Particularly in the first year, a lot of legal research and writing faculty already use highlighter exercises to help students understand the structure of IRAC or IREAC. We adapt that into our own model here, and then we also provide a compare-contrast exercise and a self-assessment reflection. So the student self-assessment exercises are all designed to appeal to multiple learning styles. That was extremely important to us because we want to capture all of the students in your class wherever they're coming in, because we want all students to be able to use them to identify their strengths and their weaknesses, both, again, structurally and substantively, so that they can target the areas that need work. With our CivPro module, the student self-assessment exercise was broken into these three pieces: the highlighter exercise, the compare contrast, and the self-assessment. So we'll start off by glancing at the highlighter exercise. So the highlighter exercise, the purpose of it was really to support students in identifying whether they were writing their answer in a logical and organized manner following IRAC. This seems pretty self-evident on the back end of law school, but you have to remember that these exercises are often going to be used in the first weeks of law school. And in fact, our first exercise, when it was test-driven in Anne's class, was test-driven within the first month of school. So this was well before even midterms, right? And these are students who have not yet had a lot of legal research and writing class. So this is a brand new skill for them. And learning how to communicate the right answer, even if they understand the right answer, is half the battle up front. So this highlighter exercise has them first mark up a sample answer. They highlight the issue statements in pink, and then the rule and the rule explanation in yellow, and then finally their analysis in green, and then the final conclusion in pink again. And by doing that with the sample answer, we model that pink, yellow, green, pink format that they should be seeing when they move on to do it with their own answer. So having done that, they continue through, and throughout it, we are providing then upfront feedback, right, on the purpose and the ideal format of the IRAC and each piece of the IRAC. So we're reinforcing the purpose of a rule and rule explanation. You'll see that not just telling them to highlight it in yellow, but reminding them what the purpose of a rule statement is, how it should be applied. And for example, here in step 3, when we're focused on the analysis portion, we actually give them some formulas, so to speak, in that bottom half, so that if they don't yet have an analysis understanding, they can start practicing some of this formula to make their sentences into an analysis and just get them started. But we take it even deeper in the analysis section because it's often easy for 1Ls to think that they've provided an analysis, but in fact, we find it's just a list of facts, right? If we're lucky, and it's there at all. And so what we do is we have them underline the rule language, circle each fact, and then draw a box around any connector word like because or when, so that they are able to see that each analysis sentence that they had highlighted green has each of these pieces. Because if they're not all there, it's not an analysis. And so this really helps them assess whether or not the sentences that they've highlighted green are actually an analysis or just a list of facts. Now, when they're doing that, spoiler alert, right, on the sample answer, they're all there. The question is when they work through their own answer after working through the sample answer, whether all those pieces are still there. And so we're helping to model and then allow them to reinforce it through the review of their own answer. So once they've worked through that sample answer, seen what that goal would look like, then they're asked to go back through their own answer and do that highlighting and underlining and boxing and all of those steps to see how it compares to that sample answer. The next exercise we have them go through is a compare and contrast exercise. So the highlighter exercise helps them figure out, did we even have all the pieces of IRAC? This exercise helps them identify whether each individual piece of IRAC was fully developed. And so what we do is we take the model answer and we break it into this table format, line by line, and each line is labeled with which piece of IRAC you're looking at. And the students are then to take their answer and find those similar sentences and plug them into the table. So for example, this starts with our overarching issue for this essay question, or for this performance task, actually, now that I think about it, and it is federal subject matter jurisdiction, right? So we start out with the overall issue, but then as you'll see on the next couple slides, we break that into sub-issues. And so we look to see, did you first address the overarching issue. It could be you jump straight into, federal question jurisdiction or diversity jurisdiction, and we want to show them that this is a strategy, right? The kind of doing baby IRACs. And so we're doing this with the model answer for them, having them plug in their own so that they're able to collect data on their strengths and weaknesses. We really encourage them, even from this paragraph introducing the exercise, to take on the role of scientist, not judge. I joke with my students, I know you're in law school, but we're actually going to pretend like we're not for a minute and that we don't want to grow up and be a judge. We want to be a scientist. We want to collect data objectively, not judging ourselves for is or isn't it there, but saying, okay, what can I do better next time? What can be my 1% level up? And so this is just a short excerpt from it. You can see the overarching issue. And then again, leading into the sub issue, right? So recognizing that there are these mini IRACs where they'd go through federal question, and then they would go later on through diversity jurisdiction, and breaking it down by, again, issue, rule, analysis, conclusion, so that they're remembering also within those sub-issues that they'd want to come to a mini conclusion, right, before they move on to the next one. And so this obviously cuts off at the federal question portion. The actual exercise continues with sub-issue number 2, which is the diversity jurisdiction, and then continues all the way through an overall conclusion as well. So we're really trying to, again, model for them in a different manner than we did the first time, and reinforce all of the pieces structurally as well as the law and the application that they should be understanding at this point in the semester. So then we close out with part 3, which is a self-assessment reflection. And the purpose of this one is really to have them take a step back, having done those 2 exercises, and ask them, okay, looking at this as a whole, let's look first on how did you even prepare for this exercise, right? It could be that the professor gave it in class. It might have been open book, it might have been closed book, but did they do anything in advance to help organize their thoughts, organize their understanding of the law, do any practice in advance so that they can decide what would have helped me next time as I'm preparing for a midterm or as I'm preparing for a final exam, right? How can I better do my study strategy? We also have them reflect on their organization. And so did they break this down into sub-issues? Were there headings? What did it look like structurally compared to the sample answer? And then we have them drill into the different sections of IRAC and reflect on whether or not their answer differed and how they could improve it next time. And so you can see we do not ask leading questions, right? These are not yes, no's. It is why or why not. We want them to actually think deeply about, okay, why didn't I break it into different issues? Was it because I forgot that there were multiple issues here? Was it because it just hadn't occurred to me yet? And I'm going to do better by just knowing that next time to think about headings, really kind of assessing their own strategy. And so by doing that, what we have found is that in meeting with students one-on-one after they went through this kind of self-assessment process, we find that their own insights at the end of this self-assessment are already at a place that we would have gotten them hopefully to with our own grading, because they've had to actively engage in the process. When we grade and provide them with a grading rubric even, we're dependent upon their review of that grading rubric. We don't know for sure that they're going to take out of the exercise what we hoped they did, right? But when they have to go through and do it themselves and do it again and again and again, they are getting pieces out and they are identifying how to move forward. And so we are really creating self-regulated learners through this process, in addition to helping them develop those next-gen skills. So I'm going to hand it over now to Garrett to walk you through their self-assessment exercise as well.
Thank you, Tony. So I had the privilege to work with Dr. Liam Skilling here at the University of Hawaii on a torts module. It covered intentional torts, a little bit of negligence, a little bit of causation, and it's an excellent kind of pairing with the other torts module that we have that was developed by Jennifer Gregg and Melissa Kidder at Ohio Northern University. Theirs covers IIED, strict liability, and a little bit of negligence as well. Now, all of the modules have these integrated question sets, performance tests. We have kind of similar rubrics and highlighter exercises with some differences across them. I will say the IIED module focuses a little bit more on the client counseling and legal decision-making elements, with some really, really in-depth integrated question sets that I appreciate how much work they put into them and how reflective they are of some of the sample questions that NCBE has released. The intentional torts model that I worked on is generally a little bit more focused on some of the building, the writing, and analysis skills in the first place, and should take place or can be used pretty early on in the semester. And we'll talk a little bit about that in a second. So we've got the kind of like for the Civ Pro module, some of the highlighting, some of the kind of different professor rubrics. So I want to focus particularly on the couple of things that kind of come from test taking experience as we teach students the new like language of law, especially during that first year. That new language is not just how do we write, but it starts with how do we read. We know when experts read a case, our eyes just kind of like jump around. We've done eye tracking software to find the thing that we need rather than like reading every line versus like 1Ls and they just read line by line by line and then they go back up and read it again so that they understand it and then they still don't understand it when they get to class. So one of the things we want to try to teach is the ability to kind of step back and say, all right, not just am I trying to untangle the parentheticals for like 6 different case comparisons, but what are they actually doing in that paragraph? So we've got some exercises to read through a case, and rather than, all right, re-explain it to me necessarily, just be able to label like, what is the judge doing in that paragraph? Are they doing their analysis? Are they doing their rule? Are they referencing other cases as support for their rule? Are they responding? And if you're able to annotate your cases that way, it provides a kind of depth to your reading, and it also is a good map for them to reference when they go to classes. We've got kind of similar color coding exercises with a particular focus, like Tony said on first, can you do it for a sample answer, but then also can you do it for your own as our samples get kind of increasingly complicated over time with adding on sub-rules and even ifs to do. We also think that there's probably some value, and we put them into some of the faculty guides, maybe to do a peer exercise with it as well. Because the more exposure we can give students to that idea of, all right, law is just composed of issue statements, rule statements, and analysis statements with conclusions on occasion. Can you go find those in other people's work as well so that we can begin to show them how to see that same structure in different contexts? Speaking of the same structure in different contexts, this is the part of the modules that I'm most excited about, and that is kind of having different levels of sample answers. We know that sample answers take a long time to write. They're definitely our favorite activity as professors as we try to give students an idea of the thing that they're aiming at. We know that if we look at some of the older Barbary sample answers, they're not particularly IRAC'd. We know that if we look at maybe Kaplan or Themis's sample answers, that they're 2,500 words long. Maybe we send them to like the New York Bar, they publish their like high passing essays. And that's, again, 2,100, 2,000 words long, but it was written on the bar, so it doesn't have the best structure or necessarily what we're looking for. And when we give students these sample answers, especially kind of 1L students to see what they're doing, they see something that is absolutely unattainable for where they currently are. So we want to kind of give them a process or a set of steps, just examples along the way. Each example is complete, but it doesn't mean that we can't add stuff to it over time. So you've got your big like Platonic ideal example of here is everything you could possibly write. This is where you're headed. But it also comes with these kind of like, at least it's complete examples with the bare basics, still IRAC, still with analysis, not just listing facts. And then it kind of works its way up. It gives professors the opportunity to point students to, hey, this is kind of the level of sample answer that I want. Some may want something that looks like the full-on answer, and others may have a whole bunch of issues on their test and say you just need to be really efficient in how you're approaching them. And I've had a lot of success in both running it in the torts class here, where we ran it pretty early in the semester to give them some examples of the kind of writing we wanted them to do going forward. But I've also been able to use this in some of our extended bar review classes where we retouch on torts again. In the fall, I've used it in some of my secure transaction classes for my 3Ls as well. And it gives them that kind of different sort of model for what they're actually looking for, especially when it comes to writing shorter essays for the bar. And then we have for the performance tests, these are very much like your MPT or your traditional MPT. We've got your traditional writing rubrics, but we also kind of loop back to what we started with here on being able to name what is happening, being able to accurately separate different legal writing tasks from each other. Where is the standard of review? Where is kind of my general rule statement? How do I break it into sub-issues? How do I kind of label everything inside of like a full performance test answer before we go ask them to write it themselves? That way they can see what they're doing reflected and the full answer, and then know that that's something that they're building up to over time. The models also include kind of sample note-taking, and it is useful to put it directly opposite of the model answer itself, so you can see how the notes directly translate into what you're writing so that you can be efficient and make it under those kind of time constraints. And that brings us to how do we get our faculty to adopt some of these tools over time? Tony?
Right. So each of these bar skills modules, again, are designed to be adopted either in pieces or as a whole. So faculty can dip their toes into the NextGen Bar using formative assessments, or they can integrate it through their entire course. So as we test drove these last fall, we test drove them as the integrated throughout the entire course, full-blown design. But we were also intentional in how we designed them so that they can be used as standalone modules if a faculty member just wants to drop one or two of them in. So for example, with our CivPro module, we recognize that there are a lot of variations in how CivPro is taught in terms of order between different schools, especially if it's a 1 semester versus 2 semester offering. And so we have the first 3 modules of our larger module are utilizing the same fact scenario, but they can be used in whichever order the professor is covering the actual substantive law that's being tested by those modules. So they can be used all 3 of them in whichever order they want, or again, the professor could just pick one of them to integrate and leave out the other 2. We also have a final module that is very much designed to be used at the end of the semester or at the end of the course because it integrates a number of concepts that are taught throughout the course of a civil procedure class. So it includes joinder, subject matter jurisdiction, and preclusion. And we did that because we recognized that a first month 1L is very different than a last week before finals 1L. And so we wanted to give them the opportunity to, again, grow from being focused on individual concepts to being able to see how multiple concepts might come together in one exercise. And so my professor, my co-author, Professor Ann Scarlett here at SLU, assigned the first of our modules to her CivPro class just a few weeks into the fall semester. And it was a big wake-up call for those students, especially on their legal analysis. I mean, it was not pretty. But primarily, it was not pretty because so few of them had an analysis, right? It wasn't even how do we improve upon it, was just let's get one on the paper. And that was so key, right? Because by figuring that out 1 month in, their midterms were better, their final exams were better. They were able to start making those changes so much earlier and have that not be the piece that was detracting from their understanding of the law on their next written assignment. And so by getting that message early in the semester, they avoided making that same mistake either in her class or on other graded midterms that they were approaching. So I think that's another piece to remember is that each of these may be focused on one subject area, but the skills and the analysis that they're seeing is going to translate into their other courses as well. Another note that I'd make on using these with first semester 1Ls is that the module building teams were very cognizant that they haven't had even a semester of legal research and writing under their belt yet. And so when we do a performance task, which is most similar to our current multi-state performance tests that many of us have in our jurisdictions, anytime we ask them to draft any type of document, even a memo, we have provided them with a sample, right? So we've given them a sample memo or a sample section of a brief from the law firm's folder, right? And said, we want you to adopt this format. Please follow this set of directions and apply that in creating your work product. And we've done that because we can't just take for granted that they know how to write a memo. By the end of law school, sure, the bar examiners can expect that, but not a week into or a month into or even 3 months into law school, right? And so we're giving them that format, also recognizing that what a memo looks like in their minds is going to be very specific to what their legal research and writing faculty is teaching them right then. And that will often be much larger and more complete than what they would have been writing on an assignment like this or on the bar exam. So we have also given them that guidance. And so as you're utilizing these, or as you are designing your own, that's really important to remember is to place yourself back in that first semester, very first weeks of 1L experience and think about what they're prepared to do at that point. Garrett?
As you're trying to bring along your substantive faculty, I like what Tony said of it's a good way to encourage kind of professors to adopt the modules, to emphasize that it gives the professor a little bit more control over how they communicate to students what they're looking for on their exams. We know professors are always complaining about how the exams are written, and here you get to be like, here is a pre-made way for you to tell your students what this is going to be like, with the added benefit of helping prepare them for the bar. And like I said a minute ago, many of the submodules from a bunch of the different modules are really useful, not just for the 1L classes, but especially some of the later modules for each of them can be a good starting place for both learning how and then also just providing integrated question set practice and maybe an advanced legal analysis class for kind of remedial for 2Ls, moving forward into your extended bar review for 3Ls, or even over some of the summer practice for those who are still struggling with legal writing as they kind of move forward through their career. And I think that brings us to the question and answer section. Tony?
All right.
Oh, I was going to add, I know we've really focused in on the performance task type of modules here, but I did want to note with the integrated question sets, we provide answers and explanations that the faculty can either input into something like Canvas or Twin so that they have that answer and explanation process available to the students, or they can utilize in an in-class discussion. And so we're also teaching students how to learn, right? And so encouraging them to review the answer and the explanation, reflect upon that, incorporate that back into their learning. These are study skill opportunities that we can be building in addition to their understanding of the knowledge.
All right. Thank you so much, Garrett and Tony, for this informative presentation, and also for your work on these modules. Now, the Bar Skills modules are available at no cost to our member law schools, and you can request those modules on the AccessLex Building Bar Skills Initiative website, and you can find the link to that website in the resources folder on your screen, and you can request the modules that you'd like to receive and go from there. So thank you again, Garrett and Tony, and I'm sure everyone at home is clapping and cheering for what you provided for us today. Thanks. Bye.
Can I make one more plug, Aaron, which is you've seen the subjects that we already have Bar Skills modules written for. If you're teaching a class that's not on that list, they are still accepting applications for the next set of module building teams. So if you're so inspired after this presentation, go on to the website as well for more information about that application, because I think it's open through the end of this month.
Excellent.